The sound of your own breathing gets loud when you're running for your life, loud enough to drown out everything else, loud enough to make you believe that maybe, if you run far enough and fast enough, you can outrun what you've done. Private Daniel Webb had been running for 3 days. 3 days since he'd walked away from Fort Houston under cover of darkness, leaving behind his rifle, his uniform jacket, his bedroll, everything that would slow him down or mark him as a deserter. 3 days of moving through high desert terrain with nothing but the clothes on his back, a canteen half full of water, and a haversack containing exactly 6 hardtack biscuits and 2 strips of dried beef. Desertion was a hanging offense. Daniel knew that. Every man in the army knew that. They made examples of the men they caught, strung them up in front of the whole regiment so you'd remember what happened when you broke your oath and ran. But Daniel had run anyway, because staying meant something worse than death. 3 nights ago, Colonel Morrison had briefed the regiment on their next operation. "We're not soldiers," Morrison had said, whiskey on his breath and murder in his eyes. "We're extermination specialists. Every Apache, man, woman, child, is an obstacle to progress. Tomorrow at dawn, we remove obstacles." The plan was simple. 3 Apache villages along the Gila River. Peaceful villages, families who'd been trading with settlers for years. Morrison's orders were to surround them at dawn, kill everyone, burn everything. Clear the land for railroad investors who'd paid the right politicians. Daniel had stood in that formation and listened to good men nod along because following orders was easier than questioning them. And that night, while the rest of the regiment slept, Daniel Webb had made a choice that would brand him a coward and a traitor for the rest of his short life. He'd rather hang as a deserter than live as a murderer. The desert at night was cold in ways that surprised people. During the day, the sun baked the ground until you could fry an egg on a rock. But when darkness fell, the heat bled away fast. Daniel had no bedroll, no coat. He walked through the night to stay warm, dozed in whatever shade he could find during the brutal midday hours, and kept moving, always listening for the sound of pursuit. On the morning of the 4th day, Daniel's water ran out. He'd been rationing it carefully, taking sips instead of drinks. But the desert took water from you whether you gave it willingly or not. The last drops from his canteen had evaporated on his tongue 2 hours ago, and now his mouth was so dry he couldn't swallow. Daniel knew the signs. The dizziness meant dehydration. The confusion meant his body was starting to shut down. The spots dancing in his vision meant he had maybe a few hours before the desert won. He crested a rocky ridge, legs shaking, and looked down into a narrow canyon. And saw him, an Apache warrior, maybe 25 years old, lying in the shade of an overhanging rock. Even from a distance, Daniel could see the blood. It had soaked through the warrior's shirt on the left side, had dried dark on the rocks beneath him. The man's horse stood nearby, reins trailing, shifting its weight nervously. Daniel's first instinct was to back away slowly, to disappear and keep running. Cavalry training said Apache warriors were hostile, dangerous, shoot first, and never bother with questions. But this man wasn't hostile. He was dying. Daniel scrambled down the canyon slope, rocks sliding under his boots, and approached carefully. The Apache warrior's eyes opened, tracked Daniel's movement, and his hand moved weakly toward a knife at his belt. But the movement was slow, pained, and stopped halfway. "I'm not here to hurt you," Daniel said, though he had no idea if the man spoke English. He raised his hands, showing them empty. I'm not with them anymore. Not with the cavalry." The warrior's dark eyes studied Daniel's face, looking for deception or truth. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him, because his hand fell away from the knife and his head dropped back against the rock. Daniel knelt beside him and examined the wound. Gunshot, probably from a patrol skirmish. The bullet had gone through the side, missing vital organs but causing massive blood loss. The warrior had tried to pack it with cloth torn from his shirt, but the bleeding hadn't stopped completely. Without treatment, infection would kill him if blood loss didn't do it first. The warrior's lips moved, forming words in a language Daniel didn't understand. But he didn't need translation to recognize delirium, didn't need to speak Apache to see that this man needed water desperately. Daniel looked at his empty canteen, felt his own desperate thirst like a living thing clawing at his throat. Then he looked at the warrior's water skin hanging from the saddle of the nervous horse. He could take it. The warrior was too weak to stop him. Daniel could grab that water, drink his fill, and keep running. Nobody would ever know. The warrior would die here alone, and Daniel would have a chance at survival. It was the practical choice, the smart choice, the choice that made sense when you were a deserter running from a hanging rope. Daniel Webb stood up, walked to the horse, grabbed the water skin, brought it back to the wounded warrior, and helped him drink. The Apache warrior's eyes went wide with surprise. He drank deeply, desperately, water running down his chin. When he'd had enough, he pushed the water skin away and looked at Daniel with an expression that might have been gratitude or confusion or both. "You're welcome," Daniel said quietly. He pulled his haversack off his shoulder and emptied it. 6 hardtack biscuits and 2 strips of dried beef. His remaining food, the supplies he'd been rationing to stay alive while he ran. Without them, he'd starve long before he reached the next settlement. Daniel broke a piece of hardtack, soaked it in water to soften it, and fed it to the wounded warrior. The man ate slowly, each swallow clearly painful, but he ate. Then Daniel used the rest of the water to clean the wound properly, packed it with the cleanest cloth he could find, and bound it as tightly as he dared. It wasn't much. Probably wouldn't be enough, but it was everything Daniel had to give. The warrior spoke again, his voice stronger now, words still incomprehensible, but tone clear enough. He was asking a question. Probably, why? "Because you needed help," Daniel said, "and I've spent too many days doing things that were wrong. Figured it was time to do something right." The warrior studied his face for a long moment, then nodded once. A gesture that crossed languages. Understanding. Respect. Daniel sat back against the canyon wall, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. He'd given away his water and his food to a man he didn't know, a man his army would call the enemy, a man who might very well try to kill him once he regained his strength. But looking at the warrior's face, at the gratitude mixing with pain in those dark eyes, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt human again. The sun climbed higher. The canyon grew hot. Daniel's thirst returned, worse than before, but the water skin was empty now. His stomach growled, demanding food he didn't have. He knew he should get up, should keep moving, should put distance between himself and Fort Houston. But exhaustion pinned him to the ground, and dehydration made his thoughts swim and blur. He'd given away his survival to save a stranger. In a few hours, that choice would probably kill him. Somehow, Daniel found he didn't regret it. He closed his eyes, just for a moment, just to rest. He thought that would be the end of it. He was wrong. Daniel woke to the sound of horses. Multiple horses, moving at a walk, surrounding the canyon from both ends. His eyes snapped open, and he scrambled to his feet, head spinning from dehydration, and saw them approaching. From the south, a cavalry patrol. 8 soldiers on horseback, led by Lieutenant Graves, a man Daniel recognized from Fort Houston. Hard-faced, efficient, the kind of officer who followed orders without question. They moved in formation, rifles ready, cutting off escape in that direction. From the north, Apache warriors. Daniel counted at least 20, maybe more appearing on the canyon ridges above. They were mounted, armed with a mix of rifles and traditional weapons, moving with the silent coordination of men who'd fought together for years. And at the front, on a black horse, sat an older warrior with grey streaking his long hair and a face carved from stone by decades of survival. Daniel stood frozen in the middle, the wounded warrior still lying against the rock behind him, and realized he was caught between 2 forces that both wanted him dead for different reasons. The cavalry reached him first. Lieutenant Graves dismounted, his hand on his sidearm. "Private Webb," Graves said, his voice cold as winter steel. "Or should I say, Deserter Webb. You ran. You abandoned your post. You stole army property." His eyes flicked to the empty haversack. "And from the looks of it, you've been aiding the enemy." "He was dying," Daniel said, his voice hoarse from thirst. "I gave him water." "You gave army rations to a hostile Apache," Graves corrected. "That makes you more than a deserter. That makes you a traitor." Movement from the north. The Apache warriors had stopped 30 yards away, blocking any escape in that direction. The older warrior at the front spoke sharply in Apache, his voice carrying across the canyon. The wounded warrior on the ground responded weakly, gesturing at Daniel. Graves turned, saw the Apache force, and his face went pale. "Jesus Christ, Webb, what did you do?" "I helped a man who needed help," Daniel said. "That's all." The older Apache warrior dismounted and walked forward slowly, his movements deliberate and non-threatening, despite the rifle across his back. He stopped 10 feet from Daniel and spoke in heavily accented but clear English. "You are soldier, blue coat." He pointed at Daniel's army-issue pants, the only part of his uniform he still wore. "You help my son, give water, give food. Why?" Daniel looked at the wounded warrior, saw the resemblance in the bone structure, the eyes. This wasn't just any warrior. This was the son of what appeared to be a chief or war leader, and Daniel had unknowingly saved his life. "Because he needed help," Daniel said again. It seemed to be the only answer he had. "My sons say you are deserter. You run from your army." The old warrior's eyes were sharp, reading Daniel's face. "You run because you are coward, or you run because you choose different path?" Daniel met his gaze. "I ran because my colonel ordered us to attack peaceful villages, to kill women and children. I couldn't do that. Wouldn't do that." Graves made a sound of disgust. "You're admitting to cowardice in front of witnesses. You're making this easy, Webb." "It's not cowardice to refuse to murder innocents," Daniel said, his voice stronger now despite his thirst. "It's the only honourable choice left when all the orders are dishonourable." The old warrior's expression shifted slightly. Respect, maybe, or at least understanding. He turned to Graves. "This man helped my son when he could have taken water and left him to die. He gave his own food when he had little. He showed honour when he had no reason to show honour. This is not enemy. This is man of worth." "This is a deserter and a traitor," Graves said flatly. "And he's under arrest. I'm taking him back to Fort Houston to face military justice." "No," the old warrior said. The word hung in the canyon air like a thunderclap. "You will not take him." Graves's hand moved toward his pistol. "You're outnumbered, old man. We've got 8 rifles and we have 150 warriors surrounding this canyon," the old warrior interrupted. His voice was calm, stating a fact, not making a threat. "You have 8 men. Count again if you need to." Daniel looked at the ridges, at the rocks, at the scrub vegetation that seemed empty, but wasn't. And he saw them. Dozens more Apache warriors, appearing like ghosts from hiding places he hadn't noticed. 50. 100. More. They'd been there the whole time, invisible until the moment they chose to be seen. Graves saw them too. His face went from pale to white. The soldiers behind him shifted nervously, rifles rising, but not aiming, caught between training and the mathematics of suicide. "This is an act of war," Graves said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "No," the old warrior said. "This is repayment of debt. This man saved my son's life. We save his life. That is balance. That is honor. He's a deserter. He belongs to the United States Army." "He belongs to himself," the old warrior said. "He made choice to leave your army. He made choice to help my son. These are his choices, not yours." not ours. His. If you're wondering what choice Lieutenant Graves will make, leave a comment below. Do you think he'll risk his men for military law or walk away? And what would you do in his position? Let us know. And if you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button for natives and settlers stories. We bring you these epic frontier tales every week. The silence stretched long and tense. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching, waiting to see if this would end in words or in blood. Finally, Graves holstered his pistol. Colonel Morrison isn't going to accept a story about finding you dead. Then tell him the truth, Daniel said. Tell him I'm protected by a force of Apache warriors that outnumbers your entire fort. Tell him that trying to retrieve me would cost lives he can't afford to lose. Tell him I'm not worth starting a war over. Graves's jaw worked as he chewed on the decision. Then he mounted his horse. You're right about one thing, Webb. You're not worth dying for. But understand this. If you ever set foot in territory under US Army control, if you ever show your face where we can reach you, there's no protection that will save you. You're a dead man walking. I know, Daniel said quietly. I accepted that 3 days ago. Graves turned his horse and signaled his men to withdraw. They rode south, back the way they'd come, leaving Daniel standing in the canyon with 150 Apache warriors watching him. When the cavalry was out of sight, the old warrior turned to Daniel. You give up your life as soldier. You give up your people, all for my son. This is great debt. I didn't do it for debt, Daniel said. I did it because it was right. Right? The old warrior repeated, testing the word. Your people and my people. We disagree on many things about what is right. But helping wounded man, giving food to hungry, sharing water with thirsty. This is right in all languages. He gestured, and 2 younger warriors came forward with a water skin and a bundle of food. They offered it to Daniel, who took it with shaking hands and drank deeply. The water was cool, sweet, the best thing he'd ever tasted. My name is Narki Tats, the old warrior said. I lead this band. My son, who you saved, is called Dahana. He will live because of you. You understand what this means? Daniel wasn't sure he did, but he nodded anyway. You cannot go back to your people, Narki Tats continued. They will hang you. You cannot survive in desert alone. You will die. So you have choice. Stay with us, learn our ways, become part of our band, or we leave you with food and water and you make your own path. Which do you choose? Daniel looked at the wounded warrior, Dahana, who was watching him with dark, intelligent eyes. Looked at the assembled warriors, at faces weathered by sun and hardship and survival against impossible odds. Looked back the way the cavalry had ridden, toward a life of following orders he couldn't stomach. What would I do? Daniel asked. If I stayed with you? You would work, Narki Tats said simply. Hunt, build, protect. You would learn our language, our ways. You would earn your place among us. We do not carry those who cannot carry themselves. And if I can't learn? If I don't fit? Narki Tats smiled slightly. Then you will leave or die, same as any of us. We do not promise you easy life, soldier. We promise you honest life. Life where man is judged by what he does, not by color of his skin or uniform he wore. Daniel thought about it for maybe 30 seconds. Then he nodded. I'll stay. I'll work. I'll learn. The Apache camp was 2 days' ride north, in territory so remote and rugged that the cavalry would never find it. Daniel rode double with a young warrior named Kicking Bird, too weak from dehydration to manage his own horse. The camp, when they reached it, was nothing like Fort Houston. No ordered rows of tents, no structures of permanent occupation. It was organic, shifting, built to move when moving became necessary. brush shelters, hide tents, cooking fires that could be doused in minutes. A community designed for survival. Women looked at Daniel with suspicion. Children stared openly. Warriors watched him with wariness. Narketats gathered the band and spoke in Apache for several minutes. When he finished, the band dispersed slowly, still watching Daniel but with slightly less open hostility. Kicking Bird took Daniel to a brush shelter. "You sleep here. You work tomorrow. Tonight you rest." He started to leave, then turned back. "My cousin was killed by cavalry soldiers 2 months ago. She was 12 years old, gathering water at river. Soldiers saw Apache and shot first, did not ask if she had weapon, did not ask if she was threat, just shot her and rode away." Daniel felt sick. "I'm sorry." "Sorry does not bring her back," Kicking Bird said. "But it is more than other soldiers say. They do not even know they should be sorry." He left without another word. Daniel lay in the brush shelter that night, staring at stars visible through gaps in the roof, and thought about the choices that had led him here. 3 days ago, he'd been Private Daniel Webb, a soldier in the United States Army, following orders and keeping his head down. Now he was a deserter living with the people his former commanders had taught him to see as savages. He'd given up everything, his rank, his pay, his future, his safety. He'd branded himself a coward and a traitor in the eyes of every soldier who'd ever worn the uniform. And for what? To save the life of a wounded man he didn't know, to refuse to participate in murder, to choose conscience over orders. Was it worth it? Daniel thought about Dahana's face when he'd given him water. Thought about Kicking Bird's story about his 12-year-old cousin. Thought about what would have happened at those villages along the Gila River if he'd stayed and followed Morrison's orders. Yes, he decided. It was worth it. What would you have done? Desert and risk everything, or follow orders and live with the guilt? Drop a comment and let us know. And don't forget to like this video if you're invested in Daniel's journey. It helps us bring you more stories like this one. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Daniel's life. The Apache didn't coddle him, didn't make allowances for his ignorance or his weakness. If he couldn't keep up during travel, he was left behind and had to find the camp on his own. If he couldn't contribute to food gathering, he ate last and ate less. If he made mistakes, they corrected him bluntly or let him suffer the consequences. But they also taught him. Kicking Bird, despite his hostility, was a thorough teacher. He showed Daniel how to move through the landscape without leaving tracks, how to find water in places that looked bone dry, how to read the sky for weather and the ground for game. Other warriors, warming slowly to Daniel's presence, added their own knowledge. How to set snares, how to preserve meat, how to repair gear with materials the desert provided. Daniel learned the language slowly, painfully, making mistakes that brought laughter from the children and exasperation from his teachers. But he learned. Water became tu. Food became jish. Friend became a concept more complex than a single word, requiring context and relationship and earned trust. He learned that the Apache weren't the savages Morrison had described. They were people, as complex and contradictory as any people. Some were kind, others cruel. Some were generous, others selfish. Some were wise, others foolish. They loved their children, mourned their dead, told stories, made jokes, argued over trivial things, and bonded over shared hardship. They were human. It seemed obvious in retrospect, but Daniel realized with shame that he'd needed to learn it, had needed to unlearn years of army propaganda that taught him to see them as obstacles rather than people. 2 months after arriving at the camp, Daniel was hunting with Kicking Bird and 2 other warriors when they encountered a cavalry patrol. 8 soldiers, moving through territory they clearly didn't know, following a trail that would lead them straight to the hidden camp if they kept going. The Apache warriors faded into the rocks, invisible in seconds. Daniel followed, his movements still clumsy compared to theirs but improving. They watched the patrol from hiding, close enough to hear the soldiers talking. "Track says Apache came through here 2 days ago," one soldier said. "Could be scouting our supply lines." "Or could be a family moving to new ground," another replied. "Not every Apache is hostile." "Colonel Morrison says they're all hostile," the first soldier said. "Says the only good Apache is a dead one." Daniel felt Kicking Bird tense beside him, felt the anger radiating from the young warrior, the desire for revenge, the mathematics of 4 Apache warriors with the element of surprise against 8 soldiers who didn't know they were being watched. It would be easy. The Apache were better fighters, better positioned, fighting for their lives, while the soldiers were just following orders. The soldiers would die, quickly and quietly, and nobody would ever know what happened to them. Kicking Bird's hand moved toward his rifle. Daniel grabbed his wrist. Kicking Bird's head snapped around, fury in his eyes. He hissed something in Apache that Daniel didn't need translation to understand. Something like, "What are you doing?" Daniel shook his head and whispered back in halting Apache, "Not worth, they go different way soon. No need kill." "They would kill us," Kicking Bird hissed back. "Yes, but we are not them." It was a gamble. Daniel knew it. The other warriors were watching, waiting to see if Kicking Bird would listen to the white deserter or follow his instinct for revenge. The wrong choice here could get Daniel killed, could prove to everyone that he was still a soldier at heart, still siding with his former people over his new family. But Kicking Bird's hand slowly moved away from his rifle. He watched the patrol for another tense minute, then signaled the others. They pulled back silently, letting the soldiers pass untouched. That night, back at camp, Kicking Bird sat beside Daniel at the fire. "You stopped me from killing those soldiers." "Yes." "Why? They are your enemies now. They would hang you if they caught you." Daniel poked at the fire with a stick. "Because killing them wouldn't have changed anything, just would have brought more soldiers looking for them, would have put the camp in danger." "My father says the same thing," Kicking Bird admitted. "Says we must choose our battles. That every fight we pick brings the whole army down on us. That survival means knowing when to fight and when to hide." He was quiet for a moment. "I thought you would side with them. Thought when it came down to it, white soldier would protect white soldiers." "I'm not a soldier anymore," Daniel said. "I'm trying to be whatever it is you'll let me be here." Kicking Bird nodded slowly. "My father says you have earned your place. Says you work hard, learn fast, show respect. Says you are no longer guest, but member of band." He paused. "I argued with him. Said white man can never truly be Apache. But today, when you stopped me from killing, that was wisdom. Apache wisdom. Maybe my father is right. Maybe you can learn to be one of us." It wasn't acceptance. Not fully. But it was closer than Daniel had hoped to get. 6 months after arriving at the camp, Daniel was no longer the confused, desperate deserter who'd stumbled into Dahana's presence. He spoke Apache well enough to be understood, moved through the terrain with something approaching competence, and had earned at least grudging respect from most of the band. Dahana, recovered from his wound, had become something close to a friend. They hunted together, worked together, and in the evenings, Dahana would help Daniel with the finer points of the language and the stories that carried the Apache history. "My people," Dahana said one night, "we do not write our past like white men do. We carry it in stories. Each story teaches something, warns about something, remembers someone important. You understand?" "I think so," Daniel said. "Like the story you told about the coyote and the stars?" "Yes. That story teaches not to be greedy, not to reach for things that are not meant to be caught, but it also teaches that trying to reach for impossible things is part of what makes us human. We fail, we learn, we try again." "Is there a story about deserters who join Apache bands?" Daniel asked with a slight smile. Dahana laughed. "No. But maybe now there is. Maybe you are the story that will be told. The soldier who chose honor over orders, who gave his water to dying enemy, who learned to live as Apache even though he was born white." He grew more serious. You have changed, Daniel, not just language, not just skills, something deeper. You see differently now. Think differently. I see people, Daniel said, instead of uniforms or categories. Maybe that's what I learned. That is wise learning, Dahana said, the kind that matters. But peace, Daniel was learning, was always temporary in Apache territory. The US Army didn't forget, didn't forgive, and didn't stop expanding. 3 weeks after his conversation with Dahana, scouts brought news that changed everything. Colonel Morrison was mounting a major operation. 200 soldiers, heavy artillery, supply wagons for extended campaign. They were sweeping the territory systematically, searching for Apache camps, burning them when found, killing or capturing anyone they found. And the sweep would bring them directly through the area where Narki Tats's band was camped. The band held a council. Voices rose in argument. Some wanted to run, to pack up and disappear deeper into the mountains. Others wanted to fight, to make a stand against the soldiers who kept pushing them further from their traditional lands. Still others argued for negotiation, for sending emissaries to talk peace before blood was shed. Narki Tats listened to all of them, then turned to Daniel. You know this Colonel Morrison. You served under him. What will he do if we try to talk? Daniel thought about Morrison's face at that briefing 6 months ago, about the orders to exterminate, about the casual way he'd discussed killing children as if they were clearing brush from a field. He won't talk, Daniel said quietly. He sees you as obstacles to be removed, not people to negotiate with. If you send emissaries, he'll either ignore them or use them to track back to the camp, and if you fight him with 200 soldiers and artillery, he'll destroy you. Then what do we do? Kicking Bird demanded. Run forever? Hide until there is nowhere left to hide? You make him think the cost is too high, Daniel said. An idea was forming, dangerous and probably suicidal, but it was the only one he could see that might work. Morrison knows I'm out here somewhere, knows I deserted, knows I'm with Apache. If I went to him, turn myself in, I could tell him this territory is empty, that you've moved far to the north, could send him chasing ghosts while you relocate. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Narki Tats spoke. You would give yourself to them, let them hang you, to protect us. You protected me, Daniel said. Seems fair to return the favor. It is death, Dahana said. They will hang you the moment you arrive. Maybe, Daniel agreed. Or maybe Morrison will want information first. Want to know where the camp is, how many warriors, what weapons. I can give him false information, can buy you time to move. And when he realizes you lied, Kicking Bird asked, then I die. But at least I die for something worth dying for. Narki Tats stood and walked to stand in front of Daniel. The old warrior placed both hands on Daniel's shoulders and looked into his eyes. 6 months ago, you were white soldier who ran from orders you could not follow. Today you are Apache warrior who offers his life to protect his people. This is great change, great honor, but I cannot accept this sacrifice. Why not? Daniel asked. Because you have earned right to choose your own path, to live or die by your own decisions. I will not send you to death just because you are willing to go. Narki Tats turned to the assembled band. We will move north as fast as we can. We will scatter into smaller groups, harder to track. And if Morrison's soldiers find us anyway, we will fight. But we fight as family, with all our warriors together, not by sending one man to die alone. The decision was made. The band began preparing to move, packing what could be carried, hiding what couldn't, erasing all traces of their presence. Daniel worked alongside everyone else, struck by how efficiently they could disappear, how completely they could erase evidence of months of habitation. They were halfway through packing when the scouts returned with new information. Morrison's column had split. Half was sweeping east, the other half west, trying to cover more ground. And the western half, 100 soldiers, was headed directly toward their current position. They had maybe 6 hours before the cavalry arrived. Narki Tats made the call immediately. "We leave now. Take only what you can carry in one trip. Everything else stays. Move north. Follow the Dry Creek bed to hide our tracks. Go." The camp exploded into controlled chaos. Daniel grabbed his meager possessions, a blanket, a water skin, some dried meat, and joined the stream of people heading north. Elders who couldn't move fast were helped by the young and strong. Children were carried. Warriors brought up the rear, erasing tracks as they went. They'd made it maybe a mile when Daniel heard it. A child crying, the sound coming from back toward the camp. He stopped, turned, and saw a small girl, maybe 4 years old, standing alone in the scrub brush. She must have wandered off, gotten confused in the evacuation chaos, been left behind in the rush. The band was moving away fast. Nobody had noticed she was missing yet, and in a few hours, Morrison's soldiers would sweep through this area, would find a 4-year-old Apache child alone and unprotected. Daniel knew what would happen to her. Morrison's definition of obstacle didn't have an age limit. He dropped his pack and ran back. The girl saw him coming and started to run, terrified of the strange man. But Daniel had learned Apache children's songs from the mothers in camp, had spent evenings playing with the kids while the adults worked. He sang one now softly, the one about the rabbit and the coyote. The girl stopped running, recognized the song, turned around. Daniel scooped her up, felt her arms wrap around his neck in trust and relief, and started running north to catch up with the band. He'd made it maybe a 1/4 mile when he heard the horses behind him. Cavalry, moving fast, closer than they should have been. The scouts must have missed them, or Morrison had sent an advance party ahead of the main column. Daniel ran faster, the child heavy in his arms, his lungs burning. But horses were faster than men on foot, especially men carrying children. The cavalry was gaining. He wasn't going to make it to the band, wasn't going to outrun trained soldiers on horseback. In 60 seconds, they'd overtake him, and the child would die. Daniel made a choice. He set the girl down behind a large rock, made her understand with gestures to stay hidden and silent. Then he stood up, raised his hands, and walked out into the open where the cavalry could see him. The soldiers pulled up hard, rifles rising. Daniel recognized the lieutenant leading them. Hayes, a decent man as army officers went, someone who'd follow orders but wasn't cruel about it. "Daniel Webb," Hayes said, surprise clear in his voice. "The deserter. Been looking for you for 6 months." "Found me," Daniel said. His heart hammered against his ribs, but he kept his voice steady. "I surrender." Hayes dismounted, approached cautiously. "Just like that? No fight?" "No fight," Daniel confirmed. "Just don't go north. There's nothing up there, just empty canyons." Hayes's eyes narrowed. "You're protecting them. The Apache band you've been living with." "I'm telling you, you're wasting your time," Daniel said. "They moved weeks ago. This territory is empty." "Then you won't mind if we search it anyway?" Daniel's mind raced. The band was maybe 2 miles north by now, moving fast, but leaving tracks that good scouts could follow. If Hayes's men went north, they'd find the trail, would follow it, would catch up to people slowed by children and elders. "Search it," Daniel said, "but I'll only talk to Colonel Morrison, not to you. Tell him I've got information about Apache movements throughout the territory. Tell him I'll talk, but only to him, only back at the fort." It was a gamble. Morrison hated him, would want him hanged immediately, but Morrison also wanted information, wanted to find and destroy Apache bands. The promise of intelligence might be worth delaying the execution. Hayes considered it. "You're trying to buy them time." "I'm trying to not get shot right here," Daniel said. "Take me to Morrison. Let him decide what to do with me." Hayes gave orders. 2 soldiers tied Daniel's hands, put him on a horse, kept rifles trained on him. The rest of the patrol started to move north, following what Daniel knew were fresh tracks. "Lieutenant," Daniel called out, "you really want to waste time chasing ghosts when you've got a high-value prisoner to deliver? Morrison will be angry if you let me slip away while you're off investigating empty canyons. It was a weak argument, but Hayes was career military, trained to avoid risks that could damage his advancement. The promise of delivering a deserter who'd been evading capture for 6 months was guaranteed recognition. Losing that deserter while chasing a maybe trail was guaranteed punishment. Hayes cursed, then called his men back. "Change of plans. We take Webb back to the colonel. Let the main column do the searching." As they rode south, Daniel allowed himself one glance back north. The trail the band had left was visible if you knew what to look for, but by the time Morrison's main column reached this area, the band would have had hours more to distance themselves and cover their tracks. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. Dan, do you think Daniel made the right choice? Surrendering to save a child and buy his adopted family time to escape? What would you do in his place? Let us know in the comments. And if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and subscribe to Natives and Settlers Stories. We've got more incredible frontier tales coming your way. Fort Houston looked exactly as Daniel remembered it, and completely foreign at the same time. The ordered rows of buildings, the parade ground, the flags snapping in the wind, all of it familiar from 6 months of service. But now it felt alien, like a place he'd visited in another life, a world that operated by rules he no longer understood or accepted. They threw him in the stockade, a small cell with iron bars and a dirt floor. Daniel sat on the wooden bench and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Colonel Morrison arrived an hour later, his face red with anger barely contained. He stood outside the cell and stared at Daniel like he was looking at something he'd found on the bottom of his boot. 6 months, Morrison said, his voice quiet with fury. 6 months you've made me look like a fool. 6 months of my men searching for a deserter who vanished into thin air. 6 months of wondering if you'd gone native or if the Apache had killed you. And here you are, walking back in like you're coming home from a weekend pass. I didn't walk in, Daniel said. Lieutenant Hayes arrested me. Don't get smart with me, Webb. You've got about 5 minutes to convince me why I shouldn't have you hanged in the parade ground right now. Daniel met his eyes. Because I have information about Apache movements, camp locations, leadership structure, things you can't get from scouts or captured prisoners who won't talk. Morrison's eyes gleamed with interest and suspicion. And why would you give me that information? You deserted to avoid following my orders. You've been living with the enemy. Why would you betray them now? Because I want to live, Daniel lied. Because 6 months of living like an animal in the desert taught me that I made a mistake. Because I want to come back, serve my time for desertion, and get a second chance. It was exactly what Morrison wanted to hear. The colonel wanted to believe that Daniel had learned his lesson, that the harsh reality of Apache life had broken him and sent him crawling back to civilization. It fit Morrison's worldview perfectly, the idea that anyone who experienced savage life would naturally prefer civilized military service. "You'll hang anyway," Morrison said, "but if your information is good, I might make it quick, instead of letting you strangle slow." "That's all I'm asking," Daniel said. Morrison pulled up a chair and sat down outside the cell. "Talk. Where are the camps?" And Daniel talked. He spun a story of Apache movements, placing camps in locations he knew were empty, describing supply routes that didn't exist, identifying leaders who were either dead or fictional. He mixed in enough truth to make it sound plausible. Accurate descriptions of landscape, correct details about Apache customs, names of real warriors he'd encountered, but wrapped those truths in lies designed to send Morrison's forces in every direction except the one where Narkeetat's band was actually moving. He talked for 3 hours, drawing maps in the dirt, describing in detail the layout of camps he invented wholesale. Morrison ate it up, asking questions, taking notes, planning operations based on information that would lead his soldiers on wild chases through empty territory. When Daniel finally finished, Morrison stood up. That's quite a tale, Webb. We'll see if it pans out. In the meantime, you'll stay here while I verify some of this. He started to leave, then turned back. And Webb, if you've lied to me, if this is all bullshit designed to protect your Apache friends, I won't just hang you. I'll make your death last for days, understand? I understand, Daniel said. Morrison left. Daniel sat in the cell and counted hours. Every hour was more distance for the band. Every hour was more chance for them to scatter into the mountains, to break into smaller groups, to disappear into territory so remote that even Morrison's determination couldn't root them out. 2 days passed, then 3. Daniel rationed the water and food they gave him, slept when he could, and waited for either rescue or execution, not sure which would come first, or if either would come at all. On the 4th day, the fort exploded into activity. Soldiers running, officers shouting, horses being saddled in a rush. Daniel stood at the bars of his cell and watched, trying to piece together what was happening. A young private ran past, and Daniel called out to him. "What's going on?" The private stopped, looked at the deserter in the cell, and hesitated. Then, perhaps figuring it didn't matter since Daniel wasn't going anywhere, he said, "Apache, hundreds of them, surrounding the fort. Just showed up an hour ago and took positions on all the ridges. Haven't attacked, haven't said anything, just waiting." Daniel's heart nearly stopped. They'd come, not to rescue him, he'd never expected that, but to do something, to make some kind of stand. 30 minutes later, Morrison himself came to the cell, his face purple with rage. "Your friends are here, Webb. More than 100 warriors on every ridge and hill around this fort. Want to explain that?" "They're not my friends," Daniel said. "They're people I lived with. There's a difference." "Well, those people you lived with are about to get themselves killed," Morrison snarled. "I've got 200 soldiers, artillery, and defensive positions. They've got rifles and arrows. This isn't going to end well for them." "Then why haven't you attacked?" Daniel asked. Morrison's jaw clenched. "Because they're flying a white flag. Because they've got a representative who wants to talk. Some old warrior who says he'll only speak to me directly, outside the fort walls. It's obviously a trap. Or it's actually a negotiation," Daniel suggested. "Apache don't negotiate. They attack, or they run. Maybe you don't know Apache as well as you think you do." Morrison's hand went to his sidearm. For a moment, Daniel thought the colonel would shoot him right there in the cell, but Morrison controlled himself, barely. "Fine. You want to see your savage friends so badly? You can come watch. See what happens when they try to trick the US Army." They dragged Daniel out of the cell, hands still bound, and marched him to the fort gates. Morrison assembled a small group, himself, 2 lieutenants, and 6 armed soldiers. They walked out under a white flag of their own, heading toward a flat area halfway between the fort and the nearest ridge. Naki Tats rode down from the ridge, accompanied by Dahana and Kicking Bird. The old warrior dismounted and walked to meet Morrison, leaving his weapons on his horse in a gesture of peace. Daniel's eyes met Dahana's for a brief second. The younger warrior's expression was unreadable, but there was something there. Recognition. Acknowledgement. Maybe even gratitude. "I am Naki Tats," the old warrior said in clear English. "I lead the band you have been hunting. I come to talk about the man you hold prisoner." "The deserter," Morrison said flatly. "He's a traitor to the United States Army. He'll hang." "He is man who saved my son's life," Naki Tats replied. "He is man who chose honor over orders when orders were dishonorable. He is man who has lived with my people for 6 months and earned his place among us. You want to hang him for this?" "I want to hang him for desertion, for abandoning his post, for stealing army property and giving aid to the enemy." "Enemy," Naki Tats repeated, tasting the word. "We are only enemy because you make us enemy. We want to live on our land, hunt our game, raise our children in peace. You want to kill us, drive us away, take everything we have. Who is enemy to who?" "This is United States territory," Morrison said. "Legally claimed, legally occupied. You're trespassers on land that belongs to American citizens." "Land does not belong to anyone," Narky Tats said. Land is land. It was here before us, will be here after us. You can draw lines on paper, say this side is yours, that side is ours. But land does not care about your lines, and my people have walked this land for more generations than you can count. Our blood is in this soil. Our ancestors' bones are in these hills. You come with paper and guns and say it is yours now. This is not law. This is theft. Morrison's face was getting redder. I didn't come here for a political debate. You've got 100 warriors surrounding my fort. That's an act of war. No, Nucky Tats said calmly. That is guarantee that you will listen. That you will not simply shoot me and send your soldiers to kill my people while I am dead. My warriors are here to make sure we have fair talk, nothing more. What do you want? I want trade. My people have something you want. You have something we want. We make exchange. You don't have anything I want, Morrison said. We have information, Narky Tats said. Real information, not the lies that Daniel told you. He glanced at Daniel with what might have been amusement. Did you think we did not know you would lie to him? That we did not plan for this? You are a good liar, Daniel, but Colonel already suspects. In few more days, he would know for certain, and he would make you hurt very badly before you died. Daniel felt his stomach drop. They'd known. Had counted on him lying, had this whole thing planned out. What information? Morrison demanded. We know where 3 other Apache bands are camped, Nucky Tats said. Bands that have been raiding your supply lines, stealing your horses, killing your soldiers. We are not allies with these bands. They are our rivals, competing for same hunting grounds. If they were gone, our people would have more food, more safety. So we offer you trade. We tell you where to find them. You leave my band alone, and you free Daniel to come back with us. Morrison's eyes narrowed. You'd betray other Apache to save one deserter? We would make strategic alliance to protect our people, Narky Tats corrected. Those other bands raid and bring your soldiers down on all of us. They make your army angry, and that anger falls on everyone with Apache blood. If they were gone, pushed onto reservation, or killed by your soldiers, the rest of us might have peace. And Daniel is not just one deserter. He is man who earned place in our band, who gave up everything to do what was right. That kind of man is worth protecting. Morrison was thinking about it. Daniel could see the calculation happening. 3 Apache bands, the ones causing the most trouble, in exchange for one deserter who'd already given him false information. The political value alone would be enormous. Morrison could claim he'd secured Apache cooperation, had turned one band against others, had achieved what no other commander had managed. How do I know your information will be accurate? Morrison asked. Because my son goes with your soldiers, Narky Tats said. He gestured at Dahana. He guides them to first camp. If information is wrong, if it is trap, you kill him. If information is right, he returns to us, and you free Daniel. This is guarantee. It was a hell of a risk. Dahana would be putting himself in the hands of soldiers who saw Apache as targets, not people. If anything went wrong, if the information was even slightly off, if some trigger-happy soldier decided to shoot first, Dahana would die. But Narky Tats offered it without hesitation, and Dahana accepted it without protest. This was the value they placed on Daniel's life, one of their own, walking into mortal danger to save the white deserter who'd given water to a dying warrior 6 months ago. Morrison looked at his officers, at the 100 warriors watching from the ridges, at Daniel standing bound and silent. Finally, he made his decision. All right, we have a deal. Your son guides us to one camp. If the information is good, we raid it, and then he guides us to the second camp. If that's good too, he guides us to the third. When all 3 camps are confirmed and dealt with, you get your deserter back. And you leave my band alone, Nucky Tats added. No hunting us, no tracking us, no raids on our camps. We give you 3 bands, you give us peace. For how long? Forever, Narky Tats said. Or until you break your word. Apache keep our promises. Do white soldiers? Morrison's jaw clenched at the insult, but he nodded. We have a deal. They shook hands, sealing an agreement that should have been impossible. The US Army and an Apache war leader making common cause against mutual enemies, trading a deserter's life for intelligence that would destroy 3 bands. It should have felt wrong. Daniel should have protested, should have refused to be part of a deal that would lead to Apache deaths. But looking at Narky Tats's face, at the calculation and cold strategy there, Daniel understood. The old warrior wasn't betraying his people. He was playing a longer game, making hard choices to ensure his particular band's survival, even if it meant other bands would suffer. It was the same choice Daniel had made 6 months ago when he deserted, choosing conscience over convenience, choosing the specific good he could do over the abstract good he couldn't achieve. Sometimes there were no perfect choices. Sometimes you just picked the least terrible option and lived with the consequences. Dahana mounted his horse and rode toward the fort with Morrison's soldiers. Narky Tats and Kicking Bird withdrew to the ridge, and Daniel was dragged back to his cell to wait and see if the gamble would pay off. 3 weeks later, Daniel walked out of Fort Houston a free man. Morrison had kept his word. Dahana had guided them to 3 Apache camps, all exactly where Narky Tats said they'd be. The raids had been successful from the Army's perspective, devastating from the Apache perspective. Warriors killed, camps destroyed, survivors scattered or driven onto reservations. Daniel felt sick thinking about it, felt complicit in the destruction even though he'd had no direct part in it. These were Narky Tats' strategic choices, not his. But strategy required consequences, and those consequences were measured in Apache blood. Narky Tats was waiting outside the fort with Dahana and Kicking Bird. The old warrior looked older, more tired, the weight of leadership, of making choices that saved some people by sacrificing others. You kept your word, Daniel said as he approached. And your colonel kept his, Narky Tats replied. This is rare thing. Perhaps there is hope for peace after all. He didn't sound like he believed it. They rode north, back toward the mountains, back toward the band that had scattered and would now slowly reassemble. Daniel rode beside Dahana, neither of them speaking, both carrying the knowledge of what the last 3 weeks had cost. Finally, Dahana broke the silence. You think I am monster, for guiding soldiers to those camps? I think you did what your father asked you to do, Daniel said carefully. That is not answer. Do you think I am monster? Daniel considered the question. I think you made a choice to save your people by sacrificing others. I think that's a choice leaders have to make sometimes. I think it's a choice that will haunt you forever. And I think you made it anyway because you love your family more than you love your own peace of mind. Dahana was quiet for a long time. Then, those camps, they had been raiding settlements, killing settlers, taking horses, making all Apache look like murderers. My father says they brought the Army's anger on all of us. Says removing them protects hundreds of other Apache who just want to live in peace. He paused. Do you believe that? I believe your father is a wise man who thinks 10 moves ahead, Daniel said. I believe he did what he thought would save the most Apache lives in the long run. I believe the world is complicated, and sometimes there are no good choices, only less terrible ones. You sound like him, Dahana said, like my father, thinking in strategy and sacrifice. I learned from the best. They rode in silence after that, 2 men carrying the weight of impossible choices, heading toward a camp that existed because of those choices, surrounded by mountains that didn't care about human morality or the prices people paid to survive. That's the end of Daniel's story, or at least this chapter of it. What do you think about the choices Narky Tats made, about sacrificing some Apache to save others? Was it justified, or was there a better way? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, if it kept you hooked for the last 38 minutes, please hit that subscribe button for Natives and Settlers stories. We tell the frontier tales that challenge everything you thought you knew about the Old West. New stories every week. Don't miss them. Daniel Webb lived with Naki Tatz's band for 3 more years. He became fluent in Apache, became a skilled hunter and tracker, became someone the band trusted to make hard decisions when hard decisions were needed. He never stopped being white, never stopped carrying the guilt of desertion and complicity and the blood that had been spilled to save his life. But he also never stopped trying to earn the trust that had been placed in him. Never stopped working to bridge the gap between the 2 worlds he inhabited. Never stopped believing that maybe, just maybe, individual choices could matter even when the larger forces of history were grinding everything to dust. When people asked him later about those years, and some did, when he eventually emerged from the mountains and tried to build a different kind of life, he never knew quite what to say. How do you explain that you found family among people you'd been taught to fear? That you learned honor from desertion? That you discovered your humanity by abandoning civilization? "I gave a wounded man some water," Daniel would say, "and he gave me a life worth living. Everything else is just details." It wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was too complex, too painful, too weighted with choices that had no right answers, but it was true enough. And in the end, truth was all Daniel had left to give.